Atlanta had always been the stage where secrets found a way to climb into the spotlight, but when whispers began circling about Rasheeda and Kirk Frost in 2025, the tone of the streets shifted from gossip to something darker. This wasn't about who was caught cheating, who got someone pregnant, or who got exposed in the blogs with messy DMs. This time the talk was about paperwork, contracts, and files that supposedly held the power to destroy everything people thought they knew about their marriage and empire. For years, fans called Rasheeda the Queen of Resilience, the woman who endured humiliation after humiliation but somehow kept smiling in her boutique, posing for photos, and claiming ownership of her success. Yet now, the internet buzzed with a terrifying possibility. What if she didn't really own anything at all? What if the empire the world had watched her build was nothing more than a facade controlled by Kirk Frost, a man who had mastered the art of betrayal not through infidelity, but through fine print hidden in contracts? The first ripples didn't even come from reality TV drama, they came from within the businesses themselves. Employees whispered to bloggers about documents that never lined up. Associates claimed they had signed deals that strangely listed Kirk Frost as the primary contact, even when the venture was branded under Rasheeda's name. Anonymous posts started flooding Twitter and TikTok, saying that years ago, when Frost Bistro first opened its doors, Kirk had deliberately filed paperwork that gave him majority control while presenting the image that it was a 50-50 husband and wife project. Similar murmurs came from people connected to Prest, her boutique empire, hinting that contracts had been tucked away that placed her in the role of brand consultant rather than true co-owner. These allegations hit the internet like wildfire, because if they were true, it meant that the woman fans celebrated as a self-made mogul had actually been maneuvered into the role of figurehead while her husband quietly built the trap behind her back. The blogs wasted no time circling. Headlines screamed, "Does Kirk Frost own Rasheeda's empire?" while Instagram gossip pages posted clips of Rasheeda proudly calling Prest her baby in old interviews, editing them side by side with screenshots of supposed legal filings that listed Kirk's name in bold at the bottom. TikTok detectives pored over years of love and hip-hop episodes, pulling receipts in the form of old confessionals where Rasheeda accused Kirk of making financial moves without her knowledge. At the time, those moments had been dismissed as marital spats exaggerated for reality TV. Now, rewatched through the lens of the files rumor, they looked like hidden clues. Every smirk on Kirk's face when money came up, every time he brushed off her questions, suddenly seemed like confirmation that he had always held the upper hand. Behind the curtain, the whispers grew more chilling. People claimed Kirk had been hoarding all of these contracts in a private flash drive, a so-called secret file that contained the receipts of every deal they'd ever done. The way the story spread, this flash drive wasn't just a piece of plastic, it was described like a weapon, the ultimate leverage Kirk could use if Rasheeda ever decided to walk away. Fans began asking themselves whether she had truly stayed all these years out of loyalty or whether she was bound to him legally, chained by signatures and notarized deals she couldn't undo. The narrative shifted overnight. Rasheeda wasn't just a wife who forgave too much, she was cast as a prisoner in her own empire, locked in a cage built from legalese and disguised as love. As the story snowballed, people began connecting dots that had once seemed random. They remembered when Rasheeda started showing up more often alone, posting pictures without tagging Kirk, and making subtle but deliberate moves to rebrand herself as independent. They remembered her silence when fans begged her to leave, her cryptic captions about ownership and freedom. At the time, people assumed she was speaking about infidelity, about pain, about dignity. Now those words look like warnings. Maybe she wasn't strategizing how to heal from heartbreak. Maybe she was quietly preparing for the day she would have to fight for her businesses, her catalog, her name, even her legacy. The gossip machine went into overdrive. YouTubers produced hour-long breakdowns of the Frost Empire, dissecting every handshake deal, every scene from the show, every blurred screenshot of supposed contracts. Podcasts that normally ignored reality TV suddenly jumped in, framing the issue as a larger cultural conversation. How many women in entertainment had been positioned as the face while the men behind them collected the real power? Rasheeda became a case study, her silence dissected not as weakness but as evidence of something bigger at play. Even fans who once criticized her for staying began shifting, seeing her less as complicit and more as trapped in a high-stakes game of survival. But the speculation wasn't one-sided. Whispers also emerged that Rasheeda had already called in lawyers, moving in silence to prepare her own counterattack. Rumors circulated that she wanted a full audit of every business tied to the Frost name, that she had started surrounding herself with a new circle of advisors who weren't the usual faces her fans had seen. TikTok detectives noticed her photographed with attorneys outside courthouses, her careful avoidance of questions about Kirk in interviews. The pieces lined up like a chess game. Maybe she wasn't cornered. Maybe she was plotting. Maybe she was preparing to flip the files back on him, dragging every one of his contracts into the light and exposing the manipulation fans had suspected for years. The idea gave her supporters hope that when she finally moved, she would move with the weight of truth behind her. Meanwhile, Kirk Frost's silence was louder than any denial could have been. For a man who had spent years defending himself in interviews, making excuses on reunion couches, or clapping back on Instagram, his refusal to say a word about the files felt calculated. To some, it looked like guilt. To others, it looked like strategy. What if he was waiting for the perfect moment to leak the files himself? What if he wanted to drop them before Rasheeda or her team could control the story, flipping the narrative into his version before she had the chance to reclaim it? The thought of him holding that flash drive, weighing whether to burn it or weaponize it, made the streets buzz with anticipation. Fans begged Rasheeda online not to wait too long, warning that if Kirk struck first, the empire could collapse before she even got her footing. The cast of Love and Hip Hop didn't help matters. They couldn't resist throwing shade. In interviews and Instagram lives, subtle but sharp comments appeared. One castmate smirked, "Sometimes loyalty is just a contract you ain't read right." Another tweeted, "Y'all think you know the Frosts, but trust me, the truth ain't what it looks like." Fans immediately linked the shade to the secret files, convinced the cast had known more than they let on for years. Reunion clips resurfaced, where Rasheeda accused Kirk of lying about money while the other cast members shifted in their seats and looked away. Now, those awkward glances weren't ignored, they were dissected as proof that everyone knew but stayed quiet to protect the storyline. It gave the entire rumor a sinister edge. This wasn't just husband versus wife, it was an open secret, a silence that had stretched across the cast and production for years, hidden in plain sight. The speculation reached another level when a gossip page posted a blurred screenshot of what they claimed was one of the contracts. It showed a signature at the bottom that looked like Rasheeda's, but the header listed Frost Enterprises as the controlling entity, not Prest LLC. Fans zoomed in, circled names in red, and spread the image like wildfire. Some called it fake, pointing out mismatched fonts and sloppy edges. Others swore it was authentic. But in the court of public opinion, authenticity didn't matter anymore, the damage was done. The screenshot went viral, and suddenly the phrase, "Kirk's Secret Files," became a trending topic, a cultural catchphrase whispered like the title of a documentary waiting to drop. The Frost marriage had officially entered a new chapter, one not defined by side chicks or Instagram scandals, but by contracts that could decide the fate of everything Rasheeda thought she owned. Her fans were split down the middle. Some said she had been complicit, that no real mogul could fail to know the details of her own businesses. Others insisted she was a victim of manipulation, a woman who had trusted her husband only to discover he had built a cage around her in silence. The cruelty of the internet didn't make it easier. Memes popped up calling her an employee in her own boutique, mocking her for posing at Prest when Kirk supposedly owned the walls she stood in front of. Instagram comments flooded her page with backhanded support, saying things like, "We love you queen, but you should have read the contracts." What was once empathy turned into public ridicule, and the humiliation cut deeper than any cheating scandal ever had. Because this wasn't about dignity or heartbreak, it was about ownership, legacy, and the terrifying thought that her empire had been hijacked from the very beginning. Through all of it, Rasheeda stayed silent. She posted her outfits, her boutique promotions, her motivational captions. But her silence was no longer seen as avoidance. It was seen as strategy. Fans read between the lines, convinced that every caption, every outfit, every appearance was part of her chess game. She wasn't quiet because she was weak, she was quiet because she was planning. And that made the anticipation unbearable. Every day without a statement, every week without clarity only made people hungrier for the explosion that everyone felt was inevitable. The stage was being set, and the files had become the weapon. No one could stop talking about. By the time the second wave of rumors hit, the city of Atlanta was no longer whispering, it was shouting. What began as speculation about hidden files had evolved into a wildfire of leaks, blurred screenshots, and messy bloggers claiming they had seen the truth with their own eyes. One particular outlet doubled down, posting what looked like an authentic licensing agreement. It listed Rasheeda as performer, but named Frost Enterprises as the sole rights holder of her music catalog. Whether it was real or an expertly edited fake, the impact was devastating. Fans who had bought her albums, streamed her songs, and supported her grind for decades were enraged at the possibility that her own husband had positioned himself as the owner of her voice. It wasn't just about boutiques and restaurants anymore, it was about art, legacy, and identity. For a woman who fought her way into an industry that rarely gave black women their flowers, the thought that her own catalog had been trapped in Kirk's vault felt like betrayal of the highest order. The internet reacted with venom. Twitter threads went viral dissecting every financial clue from past episodes. One thread broke down season by season the times Rasheeda had accused Kirk of shady business practices, ending with the line, "She wasn't exaggerating, she was warning us." TikTok influencers staged skits, dramatizing Kirk carrying a flash drive everywhere like a weapon, while Rasheeda plotted her escape with lawyers. Instagram meme pages mocked Kirk, painting him as a warden holding the keys to his wife's empire. The cruelty was relentless, but underneath the jokes was a serious undercurrent. If these files were real, then this was no longer just reality TV drama. This was business fraud, exploitation, and possibly even criminal manipulation behind the scenes. Whispers claimed Rasheeda had officially gone to war. Rumors swirled that her lawyers had already issued discovery requests, demanding copies of every contract, every bank statement, every business filing tied to the Frost name. Insiders suggested subpoenas had been sent out, forcing accountants, former partners, and even vendors to hand over their receipts. If true, it meant that Kirk's legendary flash drive wasn't just a rumor anymore, it was evidence that could be dragged into open court. The same files he once guarded as leverage could now be the very thing that destroyed him. Fans online recognized the shift instantly. For the first time in years, Rasheeda looked like she wasn't just surviving, she was fighting back, and while Rasheeda's silence had once been painted as weakness, now it was celebrated as strategy. Every public appearance became a signal. She started arriving at events flanked by legal advisors instead of her husband, dressed in bold, commanding outfits that screamed independence. At one fashion show, she stepped onto the carpet in a red dress embroidered with the word ownership. The message was clear. Interviews she gave were tight, careful, and deliberate. When asked about the rumors, she simply replied, "Ownership is everything. Without it, you're just building for someone else." She didn't have to name Kirk, the world knew exactly who she meant. Her calm defiance became a rallying cry for her fanbase. Hashtags like #StandWithRasheeda and #TakeBackPressed surged through social media, drowning out the critics and positioning her as a woman preparing to reclaim what had always been hers. The cast of Love and Hip Hop couldn't resist fanning the flames. Carly Red smirked during a live Q&A, dodging direct answers but hinting that she had seen paperwork years ago that didn't add up. Sierra laughed when a fan asked if Rasheeda really owned Pressed, teasing, "Y'all gonna find out soon enough." Even Erica Mena, who had no loyalty to either of them, jumped in with a cryptic tweet, "Contracts don't lie, even when people do." Fans devoured the shade, convinced that the cast had always known about Kirk's hidden files but had stayed quiet for the cameras. Reunion episodes were rewatched like crime scene footage, every awkward silence, every averted gaze now interpreted as proof that the truth had been sitting in plain sight for years. The betrayal didn't just come from Kirk, it seemed like the whole cast had been complicit in protecting the illusion, and then Kirk cracked. After weeks of silence, he finally broke with a single Instagram story. A blurred stack of documents sat on his desk with the caption, "Receipts never lie." The post exploded across the internet within minutes. To some, it was confirmation that he did in fact hold the files. To others, it was a desperate bluff meant to scare Rasheeda and regain control of the narrative. But if Kirk thought the move would intimidate her, he was wrong. Instead, it backfired spectaculark. Screenshots of the post went viral with fans mocking him, calling him pathetic, calling him scared. Within hours, hashtags like #KirkTheWarden and #FreeRasheeda were trending. Bloggers dragged him for threatening the mother of his children with paperwork instead of dignity. Instead of looking powerful, he looked cornered, behind the curtain, though. That slip-up gave Rasheeda's legal team exactly what they needed. Attorneys filed motions to compel Kirk to produce every document related to their businesses, using his own post as evidence that the files existed. Rumors spread that the court had already issued orders forcing him to turn over copies. Suddenly, the weapon he thought he controlled was being stripped from him, inch by inch, under the law. The thought electrified the public. For once, the man who had always smirked his way through accountability was facing the possibility of being exposed in black and white legal filings. And if those files revealed he had built an empire on manipulation, then it wouldn't just be a messy divorce, it could be a career-ending scandal. Meanwhile, the Frost children became another layer of heartbreak. Fans worried about how the exposure would scar them, watching as their parents' private war became public spectacle. Some criticized Kirk harshly, accusing him of choosing leverage over legacy, of putting control above the well-being of his own family. Others sympathized with Rasheeda, praising her for keeping her children out of the mess while preparing to fight for their future. The thought that her hard work might not even benefit her kids if Kirk's paperwork held true made the betrayal feel even darker. This wasn't just husband versus wife anymore, it was about generational wealth, about whether their children's inheritance was being stolen before their eyes, and then came the leak that pushed the saga past the point of no return. A gossip blogger claimed to have obtained an authentic registration document for Pressed, stamped and dated, showing Kirk Frost listed as majority shareholder under Frost Enterprises. The page spread across the internet like wildfire, igniting chaos on every platform. Fans who once defended Rasheeda were stunned, enraged, and heartbroken. For years, she had been the face of her brand, the woman standing proudly in her boutique, claiming independence. Now, the paper seemed to show she wasn't even the legal owner of her own store. The humiliation was brutal, the betrayal undeniable. And the entire city of Atlanta buzzed with one question: how much more was hiding in those files? Through it all, Rasheeda refused to break. She posted a single picture of herself inside her boutique, standing tall in front of racks of clothes. The caption read, "Built by me. Always mine." It wasn't a denial. It wasn't an explanation. It was defiance, pure and simple. Her calm strength only deepened the frenzy, with fans reading it as a declaration of war. To them, it was proof that she was ready to fight, that no piece of paper could erase her grind, her sweat, and her sacrifice. For every meme mocking her, there were thousands of comments cheering her on, promising to support her no matter what the courts revealed. The Frost saga had left the realm of reality TV mess. It had become a legal battle, a cultural spectacle, and a movement in defense of a woman fighting for her name, but the whispers didn't stop there. Insiders claimed that Kirk had more than just business contracts stored away. Rumors spread that the files also contained private agreements, confidential messages, and even personal documents that could humiliate Rasheeda if they were ever revealed. Whether true or bluff, the threat hung over her like a shadow. Would Kirk really go so low as to weaponize her personal life just to keep control of his empire? Or was he bluffing, trying to scare her into silence while she built her case? The streets buzzed with theories, each one darker than the last. And with every day that passed, the tension grew thicker, heavier, and impossible to ignore. By summer, the Frost saga had reached a fever pitch. Reporters camped outside Fulton County's courthouse, convinced filings had already been made under sealed documents. Bloggers swore they had sources in the clerk's office, posting blurry case numbers and claiming they belonged to Rasheeda and Kirk. Whether true or not, the rumor alone sent shockwaves across social media. Hashtags like #ReleaseTheFiles and #Rasheeda vs Kirk trended daily. Fans begged for answers, desperate to know whether the empire they had admired for so long had been built on betrayal from the start. And every silent day that passed only made the anticipation unbearable. By the time the heat of summer rolled into Atlanta, the Frost marriage wasn't just a storyline on VH1 anymore. It had become a legal saga gripping the entire city, a battle that no one could look away from. The whispers of sealed filings grew louder, reporters circled Fulton County's courthouse like vultures, and fans spent sleepless nights refreshing blogs, waiting for the day the first real receipts would surface in court. The narrative had shifted completely. This was no longer a debate about whether Kirk Frost cheated or whether Rasheeda forgave too much. This was about who owned an empire, who controlled the legacy, and who would walk away with the power when the final gavel dropped. The air was thick with anticipation, and even those who didn't follow love and hip-hop found themselves caught in the story. It was bigger than TV, it was history unfolding in real time, inside the Frost household. The picture painted by insiders was bleak. Rumors swirled that Rasheeda had already moved out, taking her children with her, leaving Kirk alone in their house surrounded by boxes of documents. The infamous flash drive had taken on a life of its own, whispered about in every barber shop, every nail salon, every corner of Atlanta like it was the key to a vault of secrets too explosive to imagine. Some claimed Kirk kept it locked in a safe behind his office desk, others swore he carried it everywhere in his pocket like a man guarding his crown jewels. The blogs even joked that if you bumped into him on the street, you'd hear the clink of the drive swinging from his keychain. Whether true or not, the symbolism was undeniable. Kirk had turned himself into the warden of his wife's empire, clutching receipts like prison keys, but Rasheeda was no longer the quiet wife swallowing humiliation in silence. Every move she made screamed strategy. She arrived at events without her husband but always with a new legal team at her side. Her style shifted, sharper, bolder, deliberate. One day she appeared in an all-white suit, dripping in gold accessories, the kind of outfit that spoke louder than any caption could. Another day she wore a black dress stitched with the phrase, "Never owned, always mine," down the side. Her captions grew more pointed too. "Legacy is priceless," she wrote beneath one photo. "Paper can't erase purpose." To her fans, it was gospel. To her enemies, it was a warning. And to Kirk, it was a declaration of war. She wasn't hiding anymore, she was stepping onto the battlefield with her chin high and her eyes unflinching, the cast of love and hip-hop turned into spectators throwing fuel on a fire that was already raging. Carly Red hinted she had been forced to sign NDAs about certain Frost business dealings. Sierra laughed when a fan asked if Rasheeda was finally leaving, replying, "Baby, the contracts tell the truth, and the truth is coming." Even production. Insiders allegedly started leaking, hinting that VH1 had known for years about shady paperwork but avoided showing it on camera to protect the franchise's power couple. Fans devoured every cryptic remark, convinced that when the courtroom doors opened, the entire cast would be dragged in as witnesses, forced to testify about what they had seen, what they had signed, and what they had ignored for years. For the first time in reality TV history, it looked like the reunion wouldn't be the stage for the final showdown. The courthouse would. The turning point came when Kirk, perhaps rattled by the mounting pressure, tried one last desperate move. He posted another cryptic Instagram story, this time showing himself flipping through a binder of contracts, the caption reading, "They signed it all away willingly." The story vanished within minutes, deleted before most fans could even screenshot it, but it was too late. The blogs had captured it, the screenshots had spread, and the world had seen Kirk's hand. The implication was clear, he was ready to paint Rasheeda not as a victim but as a willing participant who had signed away her empire knowingly. It was the classic Frost spin, turn accountability into ambiguity, blur the line between manipulation and consent. But instead of intimidating the public, the stunt only enraged them. Comments flooded his page calling him a coward, a conman, a husband who weaponized paperwork against the woman who built him up. What he thought was a show of strength turned into another strike against him, making him look like a man terrified of losing control. Behind the scenes, Rasheeda's legal team seized on his mistake. Court filings were allegedly updated, with attorneys demanding full access to every contract he had ever posted about, every business registration, every licensing agreement tied to her name. If the flash drive existed, the court wanted it. And if it came into evidence, the world would finally see whether Kirk Frost had built an empire or a prison. Fans online turned the moment into a countdown. Memes showed a ticking time bomb with the words, "the files," painted across it, ready to explode in Kirk's face. Podcasts treated it like a heavyweight fight, setting up imaginary rounds. Round 1, infidelity. Round 2, business betrayal. Round 3, courtroom carnage. For once, reality TV mess had bled into actual legal stakes, and no one knew which side would come out alive. The children, caught in the middle, became the tragedy no one could ignore. Blogs debated whether Kirk's paperwork threatened their inheritance, whether years of their mother's grind could be funneled away from them by contracts signed in secret. Support poured in for Rasheeda, praising her for fighting not just for herself but for her kids' future. The betrayal no longer felt like a private marital issue, it felt generational, like a wound that could scar their legacy forever. And yet, even as the gossip grew more vicious, Rasheeda maintained her composure. She never clapped back, never cursed his name, never aired her pain in public. Her silence was no longer interpreted as fear. It was discipline, patience, and strategy. Fans said she was moving like a queen in a chess game, and they were waiting for the moment she would say, "Checkmate." And then came the leak that shook the internet to its core. A gossip blogger posted what they claimed was an official stamped document registering Frost Enterprises as the majority shareholder of Prest. Unlike the blurry screenshots before, this one looked terrifyingly real, dated, notarized, and bearing Rasheeda's signature. The internet exploded within seconds. TikTok detectives broke down the page line by line. Twitter Spaces ran for hours, debating whether she had been duped or complicit. Instagram comments filled with heartbreak, support, and anger all at once. To many fans, it felt like the empire they had supported for years had been built on betrayal from the start. But even as the internet erupted, Rasheeda played her card with surgical precision. She posted a single picture of herself inside her boutique, her head high, captioned, "Built by me. Always mine." The post became a rallying cry, amassing hundreds of thousands of likes and turning into the most shared image of the saga. To her supporters, it was proof that no piece of paper could erase her grind. By the time the court hearings approached, Atlanta buzzed like a city waiting for a verdict that would change history. Reporters lined up outside Fulton County, gossip. Bloggers hired legal analysts, and fans created watch parties as if it were the Super Bowl. The Frost marriage was no longer just a scandal, it was an event. For Rasheeda, it was about liberation, about proving she wasn't a puppet of paperwork but the true architect of her empire. For Kirk, it was about survival, about clinging to the narrative that he had been the mastermind all along. And for the world watching, it was about seeing who would win when love, betrayal, and empire collided in a courtroom built for truth. The files, once whispered about in secret, were about to be dragged into the light, and when they did, the story of Rasheeda and Kirk Frost would never be the same again.